got together and decided to work on this as a project. So, Tony, you can...
Alrighty, so a little bit of background information on what the problem actually is. So, the interference that you hear whenever you do plug in your guitar is the electronic interference that enters the coils of the guitar that make the noise that the guitar will actually be playing. So this can always range of where you're at. So if you're in a place that doesn't have any electronics, or somewhere right here where you have buzzing lights and amps being plugged in, it can greatly change the amount of hum that you're going to be experiencing.
So a little bit of the mechanics behind this. The way an electric guitar works is it's essentially an electromagnet that picks up vibrating metal strings. So when you pluck a string, that vibration is going to be picked up by the electromagnet and it's going to turn into an electrical signal that goes out to the amp. Now, because it's an electromagnet, it will also pick up any sort of other interference, which is what my partner was talking about with buzzing lights and things like that. So if you're around lights or other electronics, it'll also pick up the electromagnetic waves from that.
Alrighty, so who does this affect? Well, everyone in the audience that raised their hands can agree with this, but we also looked to some online opinions just to look at our numbers. And we looked to YouTube videos that help troubleshoot this problem, guitar troubleshooting threads, and some guitarist interviews where they explained how the interference can lead to some shows where they don't have the sounds that they want exactly. But this wasn't all that we wanted to look for. We also looked out to some expert opinions, so Gus and I went out to Guitar Center, Sam Ash. We asked for people who knew a lot about this problem. And they all gave some really good insight as to first-hand live performances where they've had some issues with their sound, and yeah, it gave us a general pretty good consensus on what they thought about it.
Okay, so a lot of the solutions that came up before us when we were doing our research were very, very ineffective in two major ways. Either they were really costly or they were too hard to implement. For example, you have foot pedals and active pickups. And what these do is they mitigate the hum either outside the guitar with a pedal or inside the guitar with a different pickup. Now the issue with these is that they both cost upwards of $60 to $70. Sometimes for certain pedals they can cost $200. So this isn't good for a guitarist that's working on a budget, which is many guitarists. So in addition, there's also music software, but the problem with this is that it's software, it has to process things, so that leads to latency, and you can't do this during live performances. It's only something that exists in the studio realm. And the last thing was shielding. And shielding is interesting because it's extremely economical to do, but it takes a lot of time to do. What you essentially do is you put copper inside of your guitar, and that creates a Faraday cage, which blocks off all of the electromagnetic interference from the outside and keeps your electronics on the inside of the guitar isolated. The problem with this is that a lot of these projects are extremely DIY, meaning there's no set way to do it. It's all, this guy told me about this, that guy told me about this, I looked it up on a guitar thread, and additionally, since guitarists like to resell their guitars, you might end up, if you screw it up, you might end up ruining the resale value of your guitar. And other issues similar to that.
Alrighty, so with this in mind, the design criteria that we wanted to base this off of was as follows. We wanted it to be simple to install, so we cut out the steps of the shielding process, which can take upwards to 3 days. We also wanted it to be really cost effective, so you're not going to be making the investment that you would with, say, a foot pedal. We wanted it, of course, to be effective to try and eliminate as much of the hum as we could. And at the same time, be suitable to be something that could be used with your Stratocaster to your Telecaster, whatever you may be using. And this also has to be durable. This has to be something that you can use over a long period of time. You're not going to have to rebuy. And yeah.
So as you can see up here, here's some design. This picture right over here, this is a picture we found online. The inside the guitar. So, right here, we have our original first design, and that's the inlet of the guitar that we used to, our original idea was we were going to shield the guitar somehow with a device that would essentially mold to the inside of the guitar, so it would cut out all the time that it took to shield a guitar, because a lot of that involves taping, painting, which can take you up to two to 3 days. But if we had a uniform design, our thought process was that this could take only 5 minutes and you could put it inside the guitar.
So essentially what we're doing here though, is that we're taking the shielding idea of keeping the inside with like a copper armor basically that protects it from any of this interference. But we're keeping it out of paint. We're going to try and keep it to copper foil, copper tape, so that this is something that you know works, and you can just slide it in your guitar real quick and get playing. It eliminates the steps with the installation and eliminates the problems with cost.
There were a couple other considerations that we had, like we considered using aluminum and we looked at other metals, but the problem with aluminum is it's not as conductive as copper, and the other metals that were more conductive than copper were gold and silver, and we can't afford those because we're high school students. So here's the materials we used for both testing and creating. As you can see, we have the copper tape and cardboard. We have 2 different guitars that were the same. One was our control for testing, and the other one was the shielded guitar. And we used Audacity, which is our a digital audio workstation where you can just record audio. We used some standardized strings, some guitar cables, pretty standard stuff. Just everything you need to play a guitar, bare bones. So this is what it ended up looking like. As you can see, it molds to the inside of the guitar. You can put the pickups in. After that, you screw it all back together and you can play. It takes a very short amount of time, and a result.
So yeah, this is how we decided to go through all of our testing for this. So the installation process, we would time it with guitarists and non-guitarists, we're putting it in and taking it back out. The suitability, we weren't able to do any real testing on this, but we decided that this product that we made could be made for different shapes of inside the guitars, even as far as bass guitars. For cost, we compared the per unit cost to the retail cost of other solutions. The durability, we just gauged this off of every time that we put it in, any wear and tear, and just basically how we expected it to last in time. And the effectiveness, this is where Audacity comes in. We also use spectrograms we have some coming up here in a moment. We use spectrograms to also gauge how we saw the differences, as well as the decibel reader, Audacity's program.
So, for ease of use test, what we did essentially was we timed how long it took a non-guitarist and timed how long it took a guitarist. And essentially, what you can see right here is that it only really added about 5 to 6 minutes between putting the thing in and just taking apart the guitar and putting it back together. So, not that big of a difference, but substantially bigger than taking a whole day or up to 3 to completely shield a guitar. For our qualitative results, what we did essentially here was we administered what you would refer to as an eye exam, but with your ears. So what we did was we played a guitar sample. We played 14 different guitar samples with different settings, and we stacked them up. We asked a few non-guitarists and guitarists to tell us which one they thought was noisier. And we'll go over this later in the reflections. But non-guitarists said that 57% of the time said it was unsuccessful, and that the shielded guitar was actually a little bit noisier, and our guitarists were completely split down the middle. So a little heads up on the quantitative results. This is the front of the amp that we used. This is your gain, your treble, your middle, and your bass. So what we essentially did for the 14 different guitar trials is we chose different settings for each to replicate certain guitar tones that guitarists like to use. So if it says all fives, then all of these are set to 5. And that's right here. So across the board, you'll see only about a decibel difference of about 2 to 5 in Audacity, which counts from -60 all the way to 0, which is the loudest possible you can get on Audacity before the audio starts to clip and sound very ugly. Here you have NA, which means the hum was so quiet that the microphone that we were using could not even pick up the hum. Here we have a spectrogram, which is essentially all you need to know. Heat map, high volume is white, then it goes to red, purple, blue, then low volume, which is a dull gray. So up here you can have the shielded guitar and the unshielded guitar and the shielded guitar. And what we saw was there wasn't a lot of difference except up in the higher overtones of the guitar. So this about 8K to about 4K range is, on the unshielded guitar, is a little bit more messy, but down here you can see it's kind of cleaned up a little bit. And it's more apparent on the unshielded and shielded guitar on a clean channel, which is not distorted. So the difference between rock guitar and like country, for instance. So you can see all the overtones from up here are cleaned up. Real quick, overtones. The overtone of, like, I have a different voice from Tony. Tony has a different voice than me. That's because, well, when we have fundamental frequencies, which like 60 Hertz for instance, it has additional vibrations on top of it, and that creates the unique sounds that we hear in certain instruments and voices and other things. So, as you can see, the prototype did work. However, the difference was kind of marginal, I guess you'd call it.
Alrighty, and comparing this to the cost of other solutions was very successful, I would say, because the per unit cost to make one of these was $4, roughly $4.60, and the materials that made this up was just the copper tape that we used and cardboard. So comparing this to the retail cost of other solutions, you had a 187% difference. Now, of course, it's the retail cost, so if we were to sell this as a solution, we would have a different cost for that. But even then, we're still working with a really wide range to give this as a cheaper solution. So in that regard, I would say this is a very successful design criteria.
Here's our conductivity tests, and what we did essentially here was we used a multimeter to look at the conductivity of each of our patterns that we used for shielding. So our first prototype was a little bit messy. It was kind of a patchwork of about 1-inch lengths of copper, just so we could cover up as much space as possible. And we tested it against a more uniform weaving pattern and strips. And what this essentially told us was that the most conductive would be weaving and having 2 layers of copper, kind of layering them like a waffle, I guess you'd call it, because it's kind of got a grid. And 0 is essentially meaning the lowest on the setting that we were using, and 99.99 being the highest.
Alrighty, so in the future gauging this, what would we do to improve this? Well, with that copper test, we realized that the best way to make this solution better would just be to use thicker copper. So in the future, what we would do is that we would just make the same solution, thicker copper. We actually decided that we could also cover the electronics more uniform with this, so we would actually save on the amount of copper that we're using for this, so it would also decrease the cost. And
we'd like to in the future, if we continue this project, we'd like to construct it fully out of copper. So no cardboard, just complete copper. And we also like to fit it to the pickups, so it doesn't have to, because some guitars have different insides than other guitars. So if we were able to fit this to the pickups instead of the body of the guitar, we'd be able to fit more types of guitars. We'd also like to minimize the holes that were in our design. There were a couple of spots where we had to have holes so that wires could fit through. Ideally, we want these to be as small as possible. And additionally, you may remember I talked about our qualitative and quantitative testing, which was a little bit flawed because the way we administered it was we asked which was noisier. And if we look back at the spectrograms, you'll see that because even though all these overtones are gotten rid of, we can see that allows the guitar to cut through more in the mix. So what that could be interpreted as is that the guitar is louder. And to a lot of people, there's not much distinction between noisier and louder. But to guitarists, it is. Additionally, we'd like to test, instead of testing normal people, we'd like to test more guitarists, since that's our target demographic. And we also like to, real quick, thank all the people that helped us out. Eric from Guitar Center was a big help. Hobson from Guitar Center. Chaz M over at Woodrow Wilson. Great guy. He's a good friend of ours. He was a guitarist and gave us a lot of feedback regarding the testing. You actually participate in the guitarist testing. So, big thanks to you. All right, any questions, comments, concerns? Thank you.
Well, I'm not neither am I a guitarist nor am I a physicist. So when all is said and done, can you quantitatively tell me in a percentage maybe how much improvement your device made? You said it improved, but I got the feeling it wasn't all that much. Can you quantitate that in some way?
Go back to the slide. Across the board, it's a very, very small difference altogether. So quantitatively, it's very small.
So you're saying 10%, 1%?
10%.
10%.
5 to 10% is what's in our document.
Okay.
I have a weird question. Are the students allowed to, are y'all allowed to bring your props or your prototypes up here or not?
You just said not to.
Okay, so that's a team choice or?
That was our choice.
Okay. All right, I was just curious about that. I would love to see the prototypes, by the way. First of all, I want to say very good job at your presenter voices. You present great. Great job at that. Also, I loved how the first thing you did up there is you connected to the audience. You connected to people that were guitar players. Please, just a general comment for everybody, please, when you're on stage, make sure your hands are not in your pockets. I don't know, I think that's the old teacher in me, just one pet peeve of mine. I will say that I was not able to follow all of this because I don't have this background. So I think that's okay. I don't know that you needed to add anything to explain that any better, but maybe, quantifying something in the end would have helped me. Like how you separate sounds and how you judge something interference or not, that's confusing for an outsider. I don't know if you can solve that or not, just a comment, something to think about maybe in the future. Also want to say great job on your testing and presenting the data.
Thank you.
Great job, guys. Okay, so especially Hillcrest students, this is your attendance. Log in and do this. And then, just a hint, we're seeing what you're doing. Don't be on your phone during the presentations. I'm looking at you. Yeah, you know, I'm looking. All right. Our next project is from North Dallas. I think we're going to still try to do the little ticket. Yes. Are they ready, Ms. Muniz? Okay, all right. It's just, anybody can do this, I believe, yes.
Yes.
We're just using it for attendance for Hillcrest. So, because we don't know, we're not in our classes today. So, yes, everybody please do this. I believe it's just asking for comments and questions about the presentations. It's just good for us to get that information. Is this the guitar guys?
I don't think you need a login. I don't think you need a login.
Hello?